Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Progressive Bitcoiner. I'm your host, Trey Walsh, and today we have on the show Ayelen Osorio. Now, Ayelen and I have connected in multiple different avenues, offline and online, and I was really honored to have her on as a guest because I love her work in the space, not only talking about Bitcoin, but also talking about global humanitarian issues, financial inclusion, dictatorships, and just stories of people persevering. Through her Substack, The Misfit, which she'll talk about in this episode, the name is actually changing and probably has actually at this point that is coming out. So I'll let you figure that out in the episode, but really honored to have her on. I really enjoyed this conversation talking about her motivation for writing, the stories she likes to focus on, her work, getting involved in Bitcoin conferences and meeting all of these cool new people, and her being a huge part of the community, what it means to be a woman content creator in this space, and some of the different challenges for mainstream adoptions, whether it's from the actual kind of culture and what we're trying to bring into Bitcoin and increasing diversity in the space, and really just talking about the stories that matter most and the practical applications of Bitcoin. We talk about freedom tech, Napster, and so many other things, and could have kept going on forever. So we'll definitely make more episodes like this with Ayelen and many others going forward. So really hope you enjoy this conversation. And as always, if you have any feedback at all for us, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me at hello@progressivebitcoiner.com. And be sure to check out the referral links in the show notes as well to take advantages of those. And we will see you again next week. Hi, Ayelen. How are you?
Hi, Trey. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well now that we can actually record. For folks listening, we had a few blooper moments of trying to get the show up and running, but I think we're good now. Excited to have you on the show, and I've really been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've told you again like a million times, but this is my first time being on a Bitcoin podcast, and it's very exciting, but also nerve-wracking. But I'm glad it's with you. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to, not assume too much. Some folks listening might know who you are and know some of your work, but do you want to give folks a background of your work, your Substack, and some of the things that you've been focusing on?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a newsletter on Substack. It's called The Misfit. And I started a podcast as well, also called The Misfit. And it's been a really fun project, if you will. It first started because I was just felt compelled to write, and I didn't know what I was going to write about. It was just like this needing to write about something. And so I would write about anything one week, let's say Formula One week, and then the environment the next week. But I just kept saying, I don't know what I'm going to write about. I'm just going to show up and keep writing until it got to a point when I looked back and realized, okay, I discovered my pattern. And that pattern is that I love writing stories, real stories of people. And then I realized I love writing stories about people in search of financial freedom. And so it was really interesting to see my art tell me what I was passionate about and what I really believed in, which is why I'm a big believer in just continuing to hone and carve your craft, just continuing to show up for that every day. I'm at a position now where I know what I want to write about, and that continues to be telling real stories and lessons and interviews of people in search of their financial freedom and their human rights. So what I've been thinking about is doing a rebrand as well. So I'm going to change the name. And I think by the time this episode goes out, the name will already be changed. It will go from The Misfit to Notes from the Margin. And why
Awesome.
I wanted to call it Notes from the Margin was because I want to continue to tell stories of people living in the margin in pursuit of freedom, and specifically financial freedom. So I thought that the name Notes from the Margin was more fitting than The Misfit. And it also gives me an opportunity to tell the stories of individuals or businesses or organizations trying to help them in that pursuit.
That's awesome. Speaking of the Why Are We Bullish show, so you also, I want to get into your work and stuff, but I also want to just touch on, you've been to a couple of big conferences recently. I know you were at the Human Rights Festival in Oslo, the Freedom Forum.
Yes.
So you want to talk about that this past year, going to those conferences, going on to Why Are We Bullish? I think you're starting to connect with some folks that probably must feel really good and really natural with what you're writing for and going to some of these events. So what was some of that like?
Yeah, it's been really cool just how quickly your life can change. Like at the beginning of this year, I had no idea that I would be going to so many conferences.
Hmm.
Went to Miami, then it was the Oslo Freedom Forum, which, like you mentioned, is the human rights conference for the Human Rights Foundation. It was amazing. It was the most beautiful conference I've ever been to. So moving. It's so impactful. All the speakers getting on stage, sharing their story. And you had people that were activists, journalists, human rights defenders, politicians, lawyers. I mean, all kinds of people that each of them had one passion. So their passion was like, okay, this is how I think is going to change the world, right? Like this is why I think the world is broken, and this is what I'm going to do to change the world. That
Hmm.
sort of responsibility that everybody had, and that passion and that fire, it was so contagious. It was inspiring. Of course, there were some moments where it was very difficult to hear their stories and um, just how real. Um, Crimes and abuses and intimidation and threats is for people that are trying to stand up for people living on the margin, standing up for truth, standing up for accountability of governments. Some of them that spoke at the last conference are no longer here with us for various reasons. Maybe they were put in jail or they were killed. So you go in and you hear them and you really take in their message because you think this might be the last chance that we have to see them. And they're putting everything on the line, their lives, their work, their families, like just to be able to stand up and speak for truth. It's so powerful. And then, of course, of those 3 days, the last day was focused on financial freedom. So, really, a big focus on Bitcoin. And that was really, really cool to see all these, a blend of Bitcoiners with people on the ground trying to change the world. That was really cool. I think more Bitcoin should be going to that conference
Hmm.
versus the mainstream, more mainstream Bitcoin conferences, just because I find that I think as an example, the Miami conference, the Oslo Freedom Forum conference, they're both really great, but they're very different.
Hmm.
With Miami, it feels a bit more, we're all Bitcoiners, we're all on the same page, we believe the same message. Uh, it feels a little bit like an echo chamber, whereas
Hmm.
also Freedom Forum is refreshing. In speaking about Bitcoin with activists, they give you pushback, and I think that's what Bitcoiners
Yeah.
need is a little bit of pushback to refine our messaging, to refine the things that we're working on. It's super healthy for the industry. If we stay in our echo chamber and we just believe that everything's well and Bitcoin fixes everything and as great as it is, we're only hurting ourselves and more importantly, people that need it. So I say go and speak with these people on the ground, learn from them, get pushback, and let's get together to improve Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the best messages we can put out is, focusing on Bitcoin's practical solutions because if we have theoretical sound bites, if we
Yeah.
throw awesome conferences and listen, like I know a lot of the folks over at Bitcoin Magazine, these conferences, and I know so many people's intentions are really good and well and some really great folks, but some pushback. And again, I care a lot about Bitcoin. I care a lot about the community. I have a lot of Bitcoin friends on any political thought spectrum, those things. And so when I offer any criticism or any ways of encouragement to be better as a community in my thoughts
Mhm.
and ideas, it's because I care about it and care about the messaging of these things. So I think focusing on those practical applications, A, it's a good place to start with orange pilling people, but
Mhm.
also B, it's why we're here. If it just remains theoretical, great conferences, the kind of things like, good podcast, whatever,
Yeah.
but doesn't make that practical difference, then what are we doing here? So I agree with you. I'd love to see Bitcoin conferences probably look a little more like that and sound a little more like that and get pushback. I think that's super critical because what we're facing right now is if there's pushback against Bitcoin, sometimes a lot of it's easily dismissible, right? It could be pushback on environmental stuff, pushback from Elizabeth Warren or others. Some of those just are not even starting positions because they're not even factual. But there are genuinely points of pushback against Bitcoin on like how is Bitcoin going to fix XYZ? Like, what do you mean if it fixes everything? Or is this, what do you mean by that? Maybe it's not completely disagreeing with that, but it's fleshing it out more. And I think first, let's get to an adoption stage and understand what Bitcoin is and financial freedom and these stories. But then second, you know, how can we address some practical problems with Bitcoin? What are some practical solutions and things like that? So that's fantastic to hear. And I completely agree with you.
Yeah. It's almost like being in a relationship. And if you're in a relationship and you always tell your partner, oh, you're so great, oh, you're so wonderful.
Mm,
It's superficial. You need to be able to
yeah.
give criticism and constructive criticism for because you love that person, not because
Yeah.
you hate them, but because you want them to be better. And I think as Bitcoiners, we need a little bit of that just to pull away, like you're saying, and listen to people that are on the ground. It's so healthy for us. For when I started in Bitcoin, I was really scared, especially on Twitter, to ask my basic questions.
Mm,
Questions like, okay, hold on, I don't really understand why if you're a techie person and you are always at home and learning and you hear about Bitcoin, heard about it in 2013, let's say, and you have so much Bitcoin now. Like, I don't understand how that is so much better than somebody that hasn't had the luxury of time and education to learn about it. And that's just not fair. You had different
mm,
senses of times, different access to Bitcoin, different times, etc. I don't understand how that's supposed to uplift people in the developing country, etc. But I was scared to ask those very basic questions because I thought I would get bullied or I thought I would get mocked. So I just
mm.
stayed with those questions by myself and try to find the answers by myself. And still, where possible, if I find a Bitcoiner that's kind enough, more so in person, then I will ask those more difficult questions. But I
Yeah.
don't sadly see those happening in our social layers on social media and the big conferences. I would love to see more of that.
Yeah. And that's too bad. And I think we have a long way to go. And I know there's been a lot of people, and I try to be strategic with, I mean, first of all, I'll say people trying to have these conversations on Twitter, it's not a place for conversations, not in your respect, but like if you were to post something and then a lot of the comments are just filled with hate or trolling or whatever, maybe there's some sincere ones here and there, but Twitter and these algorithms and all of it is just meant to feed off of fanning flames. It
Yeah.
really is. I think Nostr is getting a bit better at able to have real conversation with people, but it's also because the community is so small. So could
Mm,
that happen once the community grows? That's a real thing that I'm trying to wrestle through as a real, early adopter of Nostr and promoter of Nostr, and trying to write and think through that as well. But I agree, and I'll say some very basic things in my mind. Like, I think Bitcoin conferences should have more women, have more people from global audiences at conferences that say they're the biggest conference on the planet, even if they're US based, right? I don't get pushback on that, or
hmm.
saying, "Oh, that's just a woke idea," or "That's a left idea,"
Interesting.
or things like this. Some people are very sincere with that, and I think people assume I'm saying this. Some people assume I'm saying this to just check off a status box of, "Oh, the left, they just want to meet their diversity quotas," or something like that, right? And that really pains me, because I say that because I think one of the keys to global adoption is having people see how global Bitcoin is and the global solutions it has. Even if it's a US based conference, when we're talking about it's the biggest conference in the world, we want that to be reflective. And it doesn't mean the speakers and attendees there are not good voices or good people to share certain messages. I just think we need to be more intentional about bringing those people in, rather than saying Bitcoin's for everyone. Like, show up,
Mm,
and like, it's merit based. These are old arguments that people used to say, when someone would say something is sexism or racism or something. It's like, well,
mm,
no, it's open, it's merit based. It's everyone can try and be their best, and they'll be here, right? We as a community, we have to be more intentional, because fortunately, unfortunately, it's really unfortunate, the reputation of Bitcoin currently, still as it stands politically, US based, Western based, is that it's not as diverse and welcoming as some of the other crypto projects, right? But I
mm.
disagree with those crypto projects and really believe in Bitcoin. So just hammering on the point that Bitcoin is global and these are the real world solutions, or some of the reason I'm here and trying to do any of this is amplify those messages. Because quite frankly, in the US or in the West, we don't need Bitcoin, right? We do, but we don't. In some of those real practical solutions, like you talk to some of the activists that you speak to, and the ways folks are actually using it because they need it,
Yeah.
in very different ways than we do.
Yeah. And when you start to get very political, and I'm not saying you, but in general,
Mm,
for somebody that's not American, for me, it feels a bit fatiguing
yeah.
because it's like I have to care not only about my own politics and where I'm living and trying to survive and trying to help others because I believe my life here is short. I want it to have
Mm,
meaning and I want it to have impact. Okay, so I know I have a finite amount of energy and this is what I've decided to focus on. plus my own politics and stuff. When then social media and Bitcoin becomes so politicized, it gets fatiguing to the point where I've personally had to pull away and be like, we've just lost ourselves here. Like, let's
Mm,
get back to what matters. What are our values? How do we spread that? How do we just spend our finite amount of energy every day in giving back? And
yeah.
so I agree with you. I think what could help with that is just having more voices, having like you're doing, having different guest speakers from different parts of the world come over and share their points of view. And hopefully they'll make their way to the conferences, which is
Mhm.
just more stimulating. It's more enriching. It's more fun. It's only a win-win when you have more voices in the space.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we're still getting there. And I mean, what's great and exciting is Bitcoin is only it's 14 years old. It's wild how young this is and how much has already been done, but we still have to push through these cultural layers, these global layers of like what it is, what it isn't, with practical solutions.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to touch on some of your work and some of the things you like to focus on. And kind of what I want to ask you is: there a story recently, or I know you love all of your stories and different things, but there's some that stand out to you that you're like, this was really enriching, and I really enjoyed this talk that I did, this podcast, this newsletter that I wrote, something like that. Is there something that stands out to you? It could be one or a couple that you view as like, wow, I'm really glad I'm doing what I'm doing. This is really important.
Oh my gosh, that's it's like asking who's your favorite child. Uh,
Right. Yeah. Or different themes, right? It could be different themes that you've
yeah,
kind of seen that are super
yeah.
important.
Um, I okay. I two come to mind, and they were individual stories, and I wrote them last year. Um, and that's how I realized that I love doing profile features of people. One of them was a young Syrian boy um, who was there during the Civil War, and
Mm,
I met him. I talked with him, and in talking to him, and we had a translator because I don't speak Arabic, but just seeing how like defeated he was. I've never seen so much defeat and sadness in a person.
mhm,
And just trying to ask like questions, and some of the I was getting short answers, but I gave it time. I think we were a few hours just talking, and it was really incredible to hear his whole story about being in Syria, being in a classroom, getting bombed, and seeing his friends, his classmates, be deformed and burned. And he was lucky that he got out okay. And then they had to spend the resources they had to rebuild a school, and then it got bombed again. And so it happened three
mm,
times until they were like, there's just no way we can have a school here. And because he was under 18, I think, or approaching 18, then the Syrian government wanted all young men to serve the army. And so his father was like, I need to protect my children. Let's go to the countryside and hide. And so he lived there hiding and trying to help out the farms, and get cash to help his family. So you've got a civil war brewing. You've got an authoritarian regime, a dictatorship that is abusing their own people, a financial
mm,
system, nothing works. You can't PayPal, all those international remittance service providers will just bail out the times people need the most. Impossible to
yeah.
get money in. So really, really struggling, fell in depression. And then he said his mom um, died from heartbreak, just not being able to endure all of that. So you realize like these
Mm,
really economic misdemeanors and mismanagements, they affect your life so much. They affect your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual well-being, your financial well-being, your family structure, and it just ruins everything. It obliterates everything. And then from there, he went and to Lebanon in pursuit of a better more opportunities, and there then you have hyperinflation in Lebanon. And so there's
mm,
just no escape for him, and there's no place for him to go. He doesn't have money to travel, and then he goes to a country that's worse off financially but technically better security wise. And that
mm,
was just really sad to hear, just like how there are some people, there is no escape for them, there is no getting better no matter how you slice it. It's just so difficult for them. And I talked to him and it was trying to tell him about Bitcoin, and it was really hard to talk to him about Bitcoin because he didn't have a lot of education. He wasn't able to finish high school, so a lot of the basic questions he had, he couldn't answer or find on Google. And then you have poor
mm,
internet connection. It's just so many things going wrong. But I wrote that story. I sent it to him, and he used the translator and Google Translate as well to read it and send it to Arabic. And then he said he cried reading the story because it must be so impactful to go through such catastrophe in your life and then to see it reflected back to you in a way where it
Mm.
honors you and the strength and everything you have survived, and then you still keep going. And that moved him so much. And so I thought that that
Yeah.
was very beautiful to have, my love, which is writing, and my art, to give him a little bit of hope, to say, no matter what happened, none of this was your fault. You're still going. You're so strong. Keep going. You're the hope for your future country. I'm here for you if I can help you. And we still maintain in touch. We still try to learn a little bit about Bitcoin, and he will
Mm.
send me something. And we kind of write to each other. He's learning a bit of English and Bitcoin. He's got his wallet. So listen up, somebody that survived the civil war, moved to Lebanon, has his hot wallet. We're working towards a cold wallet, but
Yeah.
baby steps. And I still ask him, do you still have your private key? Yes, I do. And so that was really, really cool to form that relationship from writing, to go from tell me what your story is, I want to listen and I want to help amplify it, to now it's honoring your life, and now let's help you set some dreams, and let's help you finance them. Let's get you to have a Bitcoin wallet. And through that article, I was able to also put in his Bitcoin wallet, and some big generous Bitcoiners sent him Bitcoin as well. And he was, oh my gosh, he was so happy. He would
Mm.
send me screenshots of all the sats he would get, and he was just like over the moon. He could not believe somebody else in the world had thought about him and cared enough about him to send him sats. So
Yeah.
that was very inspiring. That was a beautiful story, and we still keep in touch.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's the one of the least we can do, right? Is if someone's like a Western, Bitcoiner and hearing about these things, just supporting people like that, like generosity and just, there's so much. You talk about global aid, which is a whole other conversation. So many strings attached, so many hoops, so many administrative burdens, but just the simple act of someone opening like a Lightning wallet or Bitcoin wallet, whatever it is, and then receiving, Bitcoin instantly from just people who are just like, oh, we want to support you. We want to help out. We want to kick in. You've been through a lot. That's incredible. And I can imagine that must have been a wild feeling.
Yeah. And just because he has felt so forgotten for so long, where like everybody has betrayed him.
Mm,
Not his family, but his government, his school, his country, everybody around him in the international community, everybody's just turned a
yeah.
blind eye or abused them, or just turned away and walked away. And so when you
Mm.
have now somebody's, oh my gosh, financing me, it's just a little spark that I could see light in him. It was so beautiful just to wake up to his messages in the mornings, early those days, with his excitement.
Yeah. And I bet he's been living through this for years, right? And then seeing a story, however long it took to read or whatever, just compressing all of that
Yeah.
into words on a page must have been really beautiful, really overwhelming, like you said, for him, just seeing like, wow, that is a lot.
Yeah, and for me
Um,
too. For me too. Like
yeah.
and writing, just crying, and this is why I think stories are very powerful, and why I think that sometimes in the Bitcoin space we focus a lot on numbers and economics and statistics and data analysis. Some people are not moved by that. Some are.
Mm,
I am not moved by that, because I just don't have an economics background, a history background. That sounds very theoretical. I want to understand it, and I will put some effort in, and then I get lost, and then I get a headache, but I keep going at it because I think it's important to understand. But a lot of people like me love stories. I don't
mm,
want you to tell me that Bitcoin fixes this. That's your point of view. I don't know how you got there. Show me how it fixed something. Show me
yeah.
what was the struggle, what was the challenge, how did it he come around Bitcoin? Why did he decide to give it a try? How did it help them? Storytelling is powerful. It has been powerful throughout history in helping people understand the world around them, understand themselves and their culture. Stories are really, really important. And I think sometimes we say we have great stories in Bitcoin. I think we can do a better job of that. I think
Mm,
this is what we need. If someone listening to this is like, oh, I want to contribute in the Bitcoin space and write, but I'm a bit nervous. No, get to it, write, and where possible, share stories. I think the majority of the people are inspired by stories. It's why they love movies. It's why they love books. It's why they love TikTok. Um,
mhm.
So stories are very powerful, and so that's what I've chosen to do, is just continue to focus on storytelling.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Bitbox. Now, Bitbox is a hardware wallet that's open source, incredibly secure and easy to use, and it's what I'm using to safely secure my Bitcoin in cold storage. Now, I know self-custodying Bitcoin can really be intimidating, but Bitbox is designed for ease of use without compromising on security. It's USB-C compatible and allows you to easily back up and restore your private keys with a micro SD card, which is really cool. Now, you can purchase the Bitbox using the promo code TPB at the link found in the show notes for 5% off your purchase. And I really want to thank Bitbox for their support of the podcast, and I'm really excited about this new partnership. All right, I'll let you get back to the episode now. Yeah, I gotta shout out you and so many others that are too long to list, and more coming out, for being like incredible women in Bitcoin, doing media, doing stories. But again, that's really important, and bringing a diversity of perspective, bringing in different thoughtful approaches to stories. And I think that's super important. So for you, I know even recently, to the time we're recording, but I think Marcy did like a guest post with you recently, right? Through your Substack.
Yeah.
So, and there's so many others, right? And so many that I'm hoping to have on here as well that are doing far more important things than being on this podcast, but just stories I want to highlight. So for you, what has that meant coming into the space, being a woman contributing in Bitcoin, but you also came in focusing on humanitarian issues, right? You're not saying
Yeah.
I want to be a Bitcoin content creator. You're like, I'm focusing on these stories. Oh, Bitcoin has some practical solutions here, and really trying to focus on that. But how have you found that? What it has been like connecting with other female content creators? I think there'd be a lot of people interested in hearing about that are listening too.
Yeah, actually, I came in first with Bitcoin. I was
Yeah.
my earlier newsletter was like, Bitcoin is the way, it's the future. It will reach $100,000 by the end of this year.
Mm,
And then I thought, that's speaking to Bitcoiners. I don't need to be a Bitcoiner speaking to Bitcoiners. I want to focus on non-Bitcoiners. So I'm going to pull
mhm.
away and go a bit more softly into the topic, massage it, go around it, and soft sell them Bitcoin. Tell them about Bitcoin without them realizing they're learning about Bitcoin. And so that's
Yeah.
where the shift in my newsletter started to happen, pulling away from Bitcoin and doing more storytelling. But being a woman in the space, it was hard to find other women and to find other content creators as well. It's only been recently, as of like I met Marce end of last year at Adopting Bitcoin,
Mm,
and then we didn't really stay in touch until more recently, where we've just been chatting uh, and just staying in touch and being supportive of each other. That's been really beautiful, and it's two Latinas, so it doesn't get better for me.
right.
But I haven't been another two women that have been really helpful is Lee Kuen, I think is how you
Mhm.
say her last name, who is a Forbes editor for crypto, Bitcoin. And
Okay.
she's been,
Yep. Yeah, I
in my
think I've heard of her.
opinion,
Yeah.
yeah, the reason why Forbes is going hard onto Bitcoin and just pumping out incredible work. And then also Natalie Brunell has been really generous. Um, I think it was last year. I said, okay, can we have a call? And she was generous to have a call. And I was like,
Mm,
how do I do this? And she was so inspirational and keep going at it, do the work. And, I still kind of email with her a little bit. And she's just like the nicest, most supportive woman. Like she just wants to see other women thrive and especially women doing content. So I've been very
yeah.
lucky to find them. I would love to find more. So if you're listening, please reach out because I'd love to have a friendship.
Yeah, that's great. And you can do it. Like these examples you gave are such good examples, of women doing awesome content creation and bringing much needed diversity to the space. And again, it's this. I try. I don't want to hammer on it too much, but I think I feel compelled to as well because I'm not hearing it enough. Obviously, those using Bitcoin, those like adopting crypto at large, because a lot of times the way that people look at it is, oh, how many people are actually utilizing crypto? It's pretty diverse politically, gender wise, things like this, right? But content, outspoken voices, those writing books, those going to conferences, those that are in the face of when people say, what is Bitcoin? The people, folks are seeing when they Google things or when they see who's putting out content. So seeing that become more diverse, I think is only good for Bitcoin adoption, only good for people able to resonate and see themselves in someone that's putting out content, right? Like someone
Mhm.
going to your space versus another space because they might see a piece of themselves in you or connect with your writing or connect with the story. That's so invaluable. And I've started to see that tide turn as well, which is really great, and just want to encourage people to go for it. And my hope is that, hey, if people hear something I'm saying and they're like, oh, people on the left can be into Bitcoin. Well, yeah, of course, because Bitcoin is just Bitcoin, or we're trying to solve problems here, or people listen to you or so many others, right? And just connecting with people that resonate with them. The more, the merrier, and we
Oh,
need more of that for it to succeed.
yes, yes, I agree. I agree. And if you're gonna do content, I say, um, I I think I heard this from Tim Ferriss, where it's just get used to working alone without applause. You're not
Mm,
gonna get any feedback, any support for a while. So just continue, do it your way. And as long as you're being authentic to yourself, they say it's
yeah, yeah,
rewarding. We'll see if that happens. But
right, right.
but also the newsletter, I think, is part of the reason why I had the opportunity to connect with the Human Rights Foundation with Alex.
Mhm.
I remember
Yeah,
he read one of my newsletters and he DM'd me, and it meant everything because I'm such a fan of Alex and his work and the way that he thinks. And so it's been sort of like a slow progression and growth there between the Human Rights Foundation and myself. And next month they're going to have the first Bitcoin, I think it's Global Bitcoin Summit in Bitcoin Park in Nashville. So
mm,
they're bringing in I think it's 100 people from 56 different countries, bringing in activists, human rights defenders with Bitcoin builders and investors. And it's just going to be a weekend of brainstorming, putting our heads together. Um, so it's really cool. And this is what we need, is that investment in bringing all these minds together to brainstorm how we bring Bitcoin to the masses, and not
yeah,
just focus only on content creation, only on being on social media, but okay, collaboration. This is my strength, content creation. Where's the builders? Where's the activists or human rights defenders? Okay, what can we do? What do you guys need? How do we help? So that's going to
yeah.
be really, really cool. That's happening next month. So hopefully we'll have more to share then.
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy and approach is like I'm just the messenger. I try to be, right. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, for those that are listening, those that are connecting, those that might resonate. Like, who are the builders doing this work? It's nothing without these builders. It's nothing without people finding super creative solutions to
Yes.
problems. Whether it's electricity generation in sub-Saharan Africa, whether it's, okay, our currency really sucks and is not reliable. We can't access banks. Like, we need to interact, whether it's dictatorships and fleeing countries. It's so many problems that I can't even begin to personally grasp and understand. So, like, content creation that's focusing on that, like, that is a good starting place, right?
Yes.
And then along the way, like you're mentioning, like early on, like I have, like, I'm a very humanities person, like studied sociology, into
Oh,
philosophy, all these deep life questions. But getting into Bitcoin, I'm trying to tinker around a little bit. I've got my Lightning node, I've got like my Bitcoin node, I've got things, and have fumbled along the way and not been afraid to. And I will say this to people, like, please don't be afraid to reach out to Bitcoiners, even if your assumption is, because you'd be surprised, reaching out to some Bitcoiners, whether it's on Nostr, but even if you're not there, because that's, super, it's not the most mainstream at the moment, but on Twitter DMs, like asking people some basic questions, you would be surprised how many people are willing to just interact and help you out on that front.
yeah.
No,
And
no stupid question. There's no, stupid questions in Bitcoin. We're trying to help people. And I think you can start to tell who some of those people in Bitcoin are, that are really about just helping the everyday person get set up and get understand. And then that has a ripple effect, right? Then they might help the next 10 people, and so on and so forth. And that's how
yeah,
this grows.
yeah. And also going to meetups like in Vancouver. I'm based in
Mm.
Vancouver right now. We had
It's one of
monthly
my favorite
meetups.
cities in the world, by the way,
Yeah. Oh,
is
it's
Vancouver. So I
beautiful.
proposed to my wife in Vancouver because it's just one of my favorite cities. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So I love Vancouver. I'm always
Vancouver,
jealous. I'm
Canada,
all
right? Vancouver,
Vancouver,
Canada.
Canada.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. Not Vancouver, Washington.
Washington.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Close, but I've always joked, like, we're like, maybe we'll move there at some point, but we're here based in New England. So anyway, I
Yeah.
just want to throw that. It's beautiful,
No, it
absolutely
is
beautiful.
very beautiful. It is also very expensive.
Yes, it is.
Insanely expensive.
Mhm.
But anyway, there's a big Bitcoin community here. It's very surprising. And at first, I remember going to the first meetup that they started here. And I was so nervous because I was like, I was going to go. I don't know what
Mm.
people are there like. And I go, and the first meetup was at a hair salon.
Really?
Yeah, at a hair salon.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a tiny hair salon for men. And
Yeah, yeah.
So shout out to Fussler because he organized. He's been the horsepower behind the Vancouver
Mhm.
meetups. Go to this event. I open the door and I'm like, oh my God, it's all men.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm so
If you don't mind me asking, when was that?
oh my gosh. I think maybe last year.
Okay.
I like in February, I want to say.
Mhm.
I could, I mean,
Okay.
and the years are a big blur now, but
Yeah, but
I'll go
within
with
like a
that.
year and a half ago or so. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I was just so shy. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, how do I can still walk away? I can still walk away. I'm not in. And I was like, no, go
Oh
in.
yeah.
So went in, went all the way, and just the nerves of just all these grown men.
Mhm.
I was like, where are the women? Where are the women? No women. Oh my God, there's no women. I was like, for a while, I thought I was the only woman. Then I found another woman, and I was just really nervous. Everyone looks intimidating, but you just say hi to the person next to you, and then you quickly realize Bitcoiners are just hungry for friendships.
Mhm.
That
Yep.
everybody just starts chatting, and then with time, as I go to more of these Bitcoin meetups, it feels so much less intimidating going because there's men, because really they're all very friendly. They're also supportive. If I ask them a question at the meetup, they follow up privately with
Mhm.
resources and things that worked for them or didn't work for them. So I would encourage people also to go to meetups. They're such a great way to connect face to face and make friendships in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean the meetups I go to here in Massachusetts as well. It's kind of similar thing. It's like there's a lot of men, but there is at least conversation at our meetups about how do we get more people out here? How do we get more women specifically to the meetups, right? And
Yeah,
I've also seen slowly but surely, just whether it's on Twitter, but it's like advertising a local thing where it's like a meetup for women or a certain thing. And I noticed probably, I think yourself and many others, whether it's at the conferences, doing certain things that are focused on women at the conferences, whether it's like casual, like after the conference or like after an event, like it's event specific, but it's also like a women's brunch. I think like Natalie might have said something about that before, which is really cool. So there definitely is an intention about having those be more inclusive and open as well to make sure the meetups, early meetups I can imagine probably felt very techie, very male focused, these
yeah,
things, but seeing, for this to really work the way we want to, let's open it up a bit more. I think a lot of
100%.
meetups are starting to be intentional about that, which is really cool.
Yeah, and the question about how do we get more women into the space, I is a really important one, but I just don't know how what the answer is.
Yeah.
I when I talk to my girlfriends, and a lot of them, if not most of them, are married. And so they'll be like, "Oh, tell me about Bitcoin," and I can tell that they're genuinely curious because, like, how are you, Ayelen, like this girl that I've known and in this particular way. Now you're into Bitcoin. Tell me about it. And I tell them about it and tell them how it's helping people around the world. It can be a great inflation hedge, etc. And I can see things start to click. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting them in. I'm getting them in.
Hmm.
And then it just ends with, oh, I'll talk to my husband about it and see what he thinks. I know in the past he's been
Interesting.
against it. And it's always like
uh,
this, I've got to talk about this with my husband and then we'll decide
hmm.
together. And it's so interesting to me. It's how do we get? I mean, I understand that in a marriage you need to make those financial decisions together,
Yeah.
right? Like you're a team now, and you know what affects one person affects the other, right? Like if you're going to put all your Bitcoin in and the other person isn't ready for that risk, you're going to cause some friction. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm just like, okay, well, that's what they think. What about your own research? And what about just, following that curiosity? What about just putting in $10? I can help you. And it's
Hmm.
just, it seems like something that seems very small for me, seems very big for them. And I wonder why that is. I wonder why it, perhaps resonated with me more than other girlfriends, but dying to know what the answer is to that because I would love to see more of my girlfriends get into Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I have all the answers to that as a
Yes?
man. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think what's interesting too is like it is a very like when I first heard about Bitcoin, and mind you, I've been pretty open about it. I didn't really get into Bitcoin and started aggressively jumping down the rabbit hole probably like March of 2021. I had
Okay.
heard about it before. I first started to get into it a little bit practically thinking, okay, I'm in nonprofits, I have like a master's degree, I have like student loan debt. This seems to be a little bit better of an option than just trying to figure it out with stocks on Robinhood or different equities or a retirement account. Cause I'm like, my millennial generation, it's like, it's not the easiest for us in terms of the landscape of all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And expensive, like Massachusetts area of the country as well, similar to what you're saying with Vancouver. So for me, it was kind of practical at first. And then I heard like Alex Gladstein and others. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, there were certain clicking points. But my initial impression of Bitcoin before really learning about it was crypto bros, young guys that like to gamble, like Miami, whatever. Like that was the only thing, which it is what it is. It's just not my cup of tea. If it is for someone else, that's great. Everyone has their own motivation in Bitcoin, which is also the beautiful thing about it. So I think historically there's that knowledge of, well, the fact that typically these types of things or stocks or investments have been like men focused on money and obsessing on money and greed is unfortunately something
Yeah.
can get tied to Bitcoin when it really shouldn't.
Yeah.
And there might be different appeals. Like in each one of your friends, there might be a different argument to be had, right? But I think that's a tough thing to get over right away. Historically, men have obsessed and fought a lot about just money and just greed and things like that. And not saying that women can't too, but just in historical context and in general, that's typically the landscape of what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And I just think that also it's a marathon, the Bitcoin education. It's not always going to happen overnight. Just it's a marathon, long-term game. For me, I think you said Alex Gladstein was an important role in your Bitcoin journey. For me, that was
Mm.
Andreas Antonopoulos. Antonop.
Yeah, I discovered
Oh,
him around the same time, but yeah, for
he
sure.
was instrumental. I heard had heard about Bitcoin, thought, okay, I should buy some. But okay, I should know what I'm buying. So I went in
Mm,
and what is Bitcoin and found Antonov's video, and that was it. It was just I was sold. Him talking about how broken the financial system is, how rigged it is for a particular group of people that are close to the
mhm,
printing machine, how inaccessible the financial infrastructure that we have is for billions of people around the world. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that makes sense. And I felt that listening to Antonop and learning about Bitcoin was the first time that I was putting words to the experiences that I had growing up. Because
mm,
I'm originally from Venezuela and Bolivia,
mm,
authoritarian regimes, grew up in the Middle East, authoritarian regimes,
mm,
and I had lived all these experiences where countries, Venezuela, rise and fall, and then Syria, and then Egypt, all these places where I lived. All I've known in my life is that countries rise and fall. There's the abuse of power, the cruelty of that power, the control over the financial rails in people's lives. All that I knew to be true in my body. If there's one
mm,
thing, is like the world is unfair. And so
yeah.
when I heard about Bitcoin, it was like, oh, I understand now why all the experiences that I lived, why they happened. And
Mhm,
so it didn't take long for me to convince, but it did take me, my whole life to go through the experiences for me to be like, got it. Right.
yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of people learn about it and they're in the comfort of the safety of Canada or the Western world. And
Mhm,
there's so many luxuries afforded to us here. My worry is that we're getting comfortable, and when we're very comfortable, that's when things start to get a little messy, and your rights can
yeah,
slowly be taken away from you without you realizing it.
yeah,
Um, so that's also part of the reason why I'm very passionate about people living in the margin and helping them, because it's the friends that I grew up with, it's the people I saw on the streets, it's um the small businesses I saw and interacted with every day, right? Like I want to help them, and I have them at the back of my head, and I remember their faces, I remember the aging, I remember the stress, and um the pent up like fear and silencing yourself because you can't speak about dictatorships, like even when
mm,
we moved to Syria, my dad had a family meeting and was like, okay, there's three things you're never supposed to talk about, okay? And the first category is politics and religion. Second is sex. And I was like, Dad, I'm not going to talk about sex. Oh my God, I'm 10 years
mhm.
old. Like,
Oh my
I
god.
don't know what you're saying. It's so embarrassing. And money.
Mhm.
And I
It's the same
internalized
here,
that.
by the way. That's like the
Is
joke
it?
is those 3. Mhm.
Oh,
Yep.
interesting. Okay. I thought it was just us. I was like, oh my gosh, this is okay. Got it. And I just internalized that and never spoke about it, because he said if we speak about those things, we can end up in jail. Like, just don't trust anybody, not even your best friends. The walls have ears, so it's very
Mm,
much a bit of, if you've seen The Handmaid's Tale, a little bit of like the eye watching. You felt that there were always
mm,
people watching. And so as a little girl, I internalized. I was like, okay, just hide. Don't say anything. Don't speak up.
yeah.
Don't share your opinions. And that's a strong thing to happen to a little girl who's already in the best of circumstances told to hide. Now it's like, no, hide to survive. And so I spent
Yeah.
the rest of my life just staying quiet until I learned about Bitcoin. And I was like, I can't keep quiet now. And I think Bitcoin just gave me the bit of like substance and uh, um, courage to speak up because I
Yeah.
believed in it so much that I was like, you know what, I'm willing to risk a lot of what I've been led to believe and risk my sense of safety for it
Hmm.
because what is more important, me and my life or a better world, right? So if
Yeah.
I can help contribute to that, to making a better world, a more fair world, especially for people that can't speak up, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So
I've been and talking to so many women in the space from all over with so many different reasons why, but there's some similarities in what you said, especially the speaking up thing, and just thinking of there's like Bitcoin is one of the greatest liberation tools for so many different groups for so many different reasons. It benefits everyone in different ways. But I think talking about like ownership and talking about like how talk to many people who are content creators, like women content creators, saying this has helped give me a voice to say, I'm going to put my thoughts out here. Like, no, screw this. Like, I'm going to be more bold. And maybe you were taught growing up, no, you have to be quiet about certain things or don't put out your opinions or these people talk about that, but not you. So that's profound as well. But also just thinking about like stories as well from like Afghanistan, using that as an example when the Taliban regime came under power again, and women weren't able to access bank accounts in so many countries as well. This also happens in the West as well. If a woman is in a really unsafe marriage and doesn't have control of money or doesn't have access to the bank account in the same ways, it can happen here. But in those places, sometimes it's literally legally not allowed. Like Bitcoin is ownership. Bitcoin is FU money. Bitcoin is like allowing women around the world to actually own something and not have to question, should I leave this marriage? No, I should can. I've got some Bitcoin. I've got a support group that will send me Bitcoin if I need it. So I can get around this. I can flee this regime. I can flee this relationship. I can, yeah, for women that find themselves in that situation. And I'm glad a lot of those stories are getting out there more and more because I think it's super profound for women's rights as well.
yeah, and it's also you just reminded me of what Natalie Smolensky said is that having property rights, owning property is really important because
Yeah.
if you don't have that, then you set up yourself and your community to a totalitarian state.
Hmm.
If you
Yep.
don't have that, then the regime, the government, whoever can go into your bank account, pull your money. It can do whatever
Yep.
it wants. And so I think with Bitcoin now nobody can. I mean, if you take care of your private keys, nobody should be
Yeah,
able
it's
to.
really hard to if you do it right, right? Like
Yes.
I will say at the end of the day with Bitcoin, like the US government could show up to my door, like barge in. They most likely wouldn't. But there is still force attributed with government that could get to it. Like someone but it's really hard compared to the way a lot of governments are. And I would say the US and Canadian governments in a lot of ways are making it easier and easier to just simply click a button and remove something from you, or click a button and make it impossible for you to transact. Like these things were more foreign, I'd say, before the Patriot Act, especially in the United States, which set a global precedent in terms of surveillance after 9/11.
Yeah.
But every year, like you said, and like Matt Odell echoes a lot, is like it happens slowly over time, this erosion. And I really want progressives and folks on the left, and we know how to politicize everything in the US, that's for sure. But it has been concerning for me, the politicization of privacy, of free speech, of property, these certain things that weren't really used to be a part of the left, but maybe it's just because current administrations have been from the left, quote unquote, for a little bit now. But I want progressives to understand these things we're talking about. If you hear us talking about privacy or ownership or free speech and the importance of that, these aren't like right wing pipe dreams or things like that. Like some in the US have politicized it that much. What we're talking about is really important for everyone, for humanity, and it has nothing to do with politics in that way, right? Like Bitcoin is a political action in a way because it's not state money, it's your money and your way of interacting. So it's political in that way, but not political in left right ideologies. And it drives me absolutely bonkers at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much you said that I want to speak to. I feel like I
Please
could
do.
speak with you for hours, but surveillance is something that's really in my mind these past like few months is the
Mm.
the erosion of privacy, like you're saying. I did a story on Gulbahar, who Haiti Waju was the last name, who also spoke at the Oslo Freedom Forum and talking about surveillance, right? Like governments are investing billions and billions of dollars and more every year on surveillance technology. And I think, is it London
Mhm.
that's a city that's most surveilled? Like there's the most cameras in every corner.
I mean, I could believe that because I used to even just try. I mean, London's also, I love London and the UK. But yeah, it was kind of the CCTV, and it was kind of like us Americans going there, or US citizens for the West, were like, oh yeah, it's just kind of a part of culture. Although everyone's trending in that direction.
Yeah, but just the use of surveillance to track people and then to eventually lure her back into China. They were
Mhm.
surveilling her and her family. They were living in France, but they were originally from Xinjiang. Um,
Mm.
Went to France. I had been there for 10 years, and her daughter was at a protest and had posted it on social media. The Chinese government saw that, lured Gulbahar, the mother, back to China, to Xinjiang, and then incarcerated her, like put her in prison,
Mm.
inhuman conditions, like brutality. And you just realize, like, then in doing that research for her, the interview, I was just seeing how the government, the Chinese government, was just the surveillance has gone so good that even if you try to hide your face with a cap and sunglasses, they can still tell by the way that your hips move and your walk and your stance who you are. So
Mm.
it's
Wow.
really hard to actually hide. And when you look at all your finances, all of that going online, and in Vancouver, you have a bus pass, which is connected to your credit card, for example. So if you're do something wrong, in my head, I'm going like 30 years down the road, then you can't even travel, you can't spend your money.
I
And
mean,
so
30
that,
is hopeful. I don't want to be too much of a doomsayer. Yeah.
yeah, no, but it's, privacy is really, really important for freedom. I ask anybody of the billions of people that are, living in dictatorships. Dictatorships will, in my opinion, use surveillance to track people, to silence them, to silence journalists, activists. It's a weapon, and it's a smart weapon because there's no blood being shed. So you can get away with a lot of crime
Hmm.
by surveilling and cutting people off financially. But I do think that there's people that are starting to question and being like, oh, maybe I shouldn't post this. Maybe I shouldn't post my children on social media. Or maybe I shouldn't do this on social media. So people are thinking. I'm not hopeless that they're going to fall into this trap. I think people are starting to feel like there's a bit of that social fatigue, social media fatigue, but also maybe I shouldn't post everything and just being a bit more careful.
Hmm.
So I have hope. I'm not. It's a fine balance being a Bitcoiner, because you're like, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, but also, oh my gosh, there's so much hope and there's so much beauty and light, and all this technology can help humanity elevate. It's kind of balancing those two realities and going between them to keep sane. If you stay in the world is falling
Yeah.
apart camp forever, you're only hurting yourself, and we need you to stay healthy to do work that helps people around the world.
Yeah. And I think, I joke too with, studying sociology in the way that I did. And I try to be better about this. I feel like my brain is trained to identify problems and see problems, but also want to try to focus on solutions,
Yeah,
because you can wake up and see only problems every day.
yeah,
And that's not a way to live, or see only security risks every day, which are real, but you have to live. There's a finite amount of time on earth. You have to live, you have to enjoy life and take care of yourself, while also caring about these issues and wanting to do more stuff there. And I want to say this too before we move on from it, the facial recognition and surveillance. So what's interesting, and the reason I mention it so much too, is, whether it's people listening or people that will listen at some point from the left, it's interesting in the US, politicians on the left, the very most progressive part of senators and congressmen and women, one of the things that is a big no-no right now is facial recognition technology with police departments. So from the
hmm,
left, many people are starting to realize this is dangerous because of racial profiling. So
interesting.
they're making that connection to where racial profiling, like this technology, can actually find someone guilty that was actually innocent, right? Or say, oh, our technology said that this person did, but actually it was Brad who did it. It was just the
Hmm.
facial recognition technology didn't get it right. And it profiled wrong based on someone's skin color or based on someone's features. And it's typically racial profiling African Americans versus other groups in certain cities. So a lot of progressive politicians are actually going against some of these companies and saying, hey, XYZ police department, we actually don't want you to use that. You need to shut it down. There's been local ordinances passed in certain cities to not allow that. I'd say right now, because we're still heading in that direction. So in some regards, these politicians, these progressive politicians are getting it, saying,
Mm.
okay, that's not okay because they're racial profiling, but they're not making the connection to like federal government surveillance or surveillance of bank accounts or surveillance of like you should or should not have this property or god forbid social credit score in the future,
Mm.
CBDCs. They're not making that connection yet. So in that way it's concerning, but they are starting to make the connection of like, okay, it can be used against innocent people in their everyday lives. And so I'm asking and encouraging, folks on the left, if you've heard this marketing, think about just the broader implications, apply that to other situations. It's all not good. There's not a net benefit to this period. So I am hopeful that we'll get there, but short term concerned.
Yeah.
Want to try to keep getting the message out that just lack of privacy is
Yeah.
not good for anyone.
No.
It's not. So let's keep pushing for those privacy enabling freedom tech. And I use that word a lot more now. Once you get into Bitcoin, you start caring about a lot of other things too
Yes.
in new ways. Maybe you cared about it before, but in different ways. So I talk a lot about freedom tech, and Bitcoin is in that. Nostr is in that.
Mhm.
Different messaging apps like Signal are in that. And more will come. So that's why I'm kind of assigning this label of freedom tech, because I think that's hugely important as well, and just as important as Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal that freedom tech.
You know what? Not to mention him too much, but it was probably Matt Odell. I mean, a lot of people use these terms, but Matt Odell talks a lot about freedom tech, and promoting that message of, and it opens the door for new technologies to be created, right? Like, I don't think there's a better money are going to be better money than the
Yeah.
Bitcoin protocol. So that I'm very long Bitcoin, but there's always new technologies that are implementing the protocol or implementing private communications that activists can use, or making it harder for the state or corporations or individuals to abuse their power on other people. I think those will continue being built out, and we just need to support open source technologies that do that, from all walks of life.
Yeah, which is why I'm also very excited about Nostr. Nostr is really exciting. Once you start posting and getting zapped, it's a bit addicting. Then you want to get witty and start sharing stuff and get those sats. So it's been really cool to be on there more recently. A bit late to that game.
Yeah, it's super fun. I mean, I'd say it's very fun. So people getting into it is really fun to use. It feels like a small early days of Twitter community. So you still have an opportunity to do that. But also the underlying tech, it is freedom tech. And every episode I try to talk to about it, whether it's on the recording or after with people. I'm like, hey, are you on Nostr? We got to get you on Nostr. I'll make sure you get sent sats and stuff if they're not already on it. Even Farida and I talked about it a little bit in our episode, and even afterwards. And her episode will be already out at this point when this one's out. So a lot of activists or people are starting to see the importance of it, because again, in the US and in Canada, there is censorship. There are people being
Yeah.
deplatformed, absolutely. But
Yeah.
as of right now, unlike some governments, like you say, like Chinese social media, right? There's not a concept of this, or other social medias where there's such censorship. Like I think about the Turkish election that took
Yeah.
place when Elon went along with the Turkish government requesting that they censor some candidates that were against the leading candidate, and president. And
Right.
Elon's argument, which is absolutely ridiculous, was, well, do you want people to have Twitter or not have Twitter? Because that was my only option, or Twitter is going to get banned. And I was like, you're running a business. You're trying to maximize money to pay for the debt that you incurred through a stupid financial decision and your ego. That's what you're trying to pay for. So he uses an argument, wolf in sheep's clothing, to say, well, it's better to have mostly free, or like, it's good enough, right? Sometimes there's some censorship, but that's okay. It's better to have that than to have nothing for citizens in a country. That's why Nostr is being built. And these
Yeah.
devs and clients, everyone, I think I posted this, like, not that I care about riches or people being rich, but I'm like, they should be some of the wealthiest people in the world, is people building open source technology, building it out, putting that protocol out there, and then people can use the code. There's no trademarks, there's no copywritten. This is true cypherpunk technology. These people are brilliant, and all they're asking for, they're not really asking for anything. They see a need and they're putting it out there. And also they're obsessive about making really good products and things, but they're also like, this is a need, and they really care about the world when they're building this out. And you and I can try to tell those stories, right? Maybe they can't tell the stories the greatest because they're coding all day and their brains just stop working at a certain point. But maybe we can tell these stories too.
Yeah, yeah, and the other thing that they're doing too is like allowing for long form content to be on it and for writers to get monetized.
Yes.
So I get that question more
Yeah.
recently because yesterday I posted like, here's a set of topics I've been writing about on my newsletter on Substack, and then gotten a few people be like, why are you writing this on? I think it's Abla News. Why aren't you on Nostr? And it's like
Yeah.
the amount of innovation that's happening in the space, in the freedom tech space, is
Hmm.
really hard to keep up with. I got onto
Yeah.
Substack because it was, at least at the time, it was easy. A lot of the writers were getting on it, so got on it. And just to like stay on top of everything that's going on in just the world in general, and then Bitcoin, and then Nostr, it's just like a lot is going on. It's hard to keep up, but I would love to do that. Is not just post like as I would on a social network, but as a writer, how do I bring my writing into this, and how do I monetize that? So I'm
Yeah.
going to be exploring that a little bit and see how it goes.
Yeah, and I get it too, and it is hard to keep up with, right? And I think a huge part of it is, and I feel the same way with the podcast. Like I am totally in on Noster. I have my personal convictions with all these things, but we also want people to hear about the podcast or hear about other things. And people are still on Twitter, they're at Facebook, they're
Yes.
at where they're at. So it's this borderline. You don't want to completely cut off content for people that aren't there yet and punish them for not understanding these things or jumping in. We also don't want to support that. It's like a really tough balance. So it's like you try to put out the message on these platforms that, hey, this is what we're doing, and selling that rather than just saying, as of tomorrow, like, this, you have to like only access my content through Nostr or something like that.
Yes.
And some people do that and that's their decision. And I get it. I get both sides of it, but it is tricky to try to live in both worlds.
You get like how we always say, you got to meet people where they are. And they're not
Yeah.
all in like I don't even know how I would have found out about, I think, Abla News. Um,
Yeah.
where would I have found that? I'm not really sure. And I'm already in the space. Like I'm living and breathing it every day. And somehow I missed it.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's new. It's not a thing of not being enthusiastic or bullish on it. I completely am. It's just even I didn't have access to it because it was hidden somewhere in the universe of Freedom Tech or Nostr. But it will be
Yeah.
really
And I just posted my first. Oh,
your
what were you
first.
saying?
Sorry, what did you post? Your first article on Abla News?
Yeah, I posted a piece of it because at this point it'll probably be out in Bitcoin Magazine by the time this comes out. But an article on Nostr and Freedom Tech focusing on that, and I was like, I put out a little sample of it on Abla News just to try it out, just to see
Yeah.
what it was like. And so it's on Abla News, but it's also like it kind of bolds it and ties it right into your profile and like posts it for you, as we would historically say on like your on all clients wherever your relays are running. So that was really cool to see. But yeah, I just saw it like randomly on Nostr the past couple of months,
Oh,
seeing people
interesting.
using it here and there. But I think people need to realize too, and a lot do. And one thing I'm trying to focus on without just burning myself out is like Nostr is there is 8 to 10,000 daily users in terms of people actually posting content on Nostr clients worldwide. That's what the data is saying right now. That's so small, right? There's a lot of people who have created NPubs and created their account for people that don't know what that is.
Mhm.
But in terms of daily users, we're still just getting there. And I think part of it too is there's such an incentive to be on Instagram, Twitter, others because you get those views, you get those clicks, you get those likes, you get that engagement. Like what to post that will either inflame or reward or do whatever in the right way for the algorithm to get your post way through the roof on Twitter, on other places. Noster's not really built like that. There's also there isn't an algorithm currently that runs those things, which is good and bad. There's also some solutions they're trying to come up with to create algorithms that you create and you choose that you're in control of, so you can filter your own content the way that you want. But there's not that many users, right, that are actually seeing your
No.
content. So a lot of people that are used to posting things, and whether that's their livelihood or whether that's the way they connect with folks, it could be a different shift in mentality. But also, you're not going to get rewarded for posting insane things on Noster
No.
the same way someone might be used to on Twitter.
On
Like some
Twitter.
accounts, whether it's in Bitcoin, whether it's politics, wherever, can post things and it's an inflammatory language or way of interacting, and then the algorithm just shoots it through the roof, and you see it on your profile at some point, or you see it in the trending section, and you're like, why is this trending? This isn't good for humanity. This isn't good to sit and look at all day. That's what's rewarded under the current system. Nostr doesn't reward that. So for some people, it takes a mental shift to go on board with it as well.
Yeah, I've been struggling with that a little bit because I feel that on Twitter, I've been pushed to the edges of Twitter. I suspect I've been shadow banned. I don't get the same engagement I had
Everyone
before.
has, I think, especially in the Bitcoin world.
You think so? Okay. And
I think
then
so. Yeah.
and then also, like you say, on Nostr, there's not that many users. And so it's like, okay, well, I am working so hard to tell these stories. I almost have no way
Mm.
of having an outlet to share those stories. And I'm somebody that doesn't have, decades of experience in journalism or in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, right? Like I'm almost coming at this with like, as a, maybe a nobody, right? Like all I have is heart and curiosity and doing this work.
Mm.
And I'm trying to just help the message of freedom spread. I don't have like either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all those algorithms aren't going to help me. They're punishing me for it. And then Nostr, people aren't getting on board because, we still need a bit of more convincing and education to do there. So it's really tough to be an independent writer trying to do work, because you can put all the hours you want into this, but if it's just not, getting rewarded, then how are you going to tell the truth, and how are you going to have eventually like make a living if that's how you earn your money? So it's really, really tricky. It's
Yeah.
very riskful to be a content creator right now. So
Yeah.
hopefully the long term changes a little bit and Nostr starts to blow up with the masses, and it'll just be really interesting and cool to see activists going in there as well and share their message, and it be different than Twitter, like you're saying. It's just too inflammable and too spicy and too numbing for the brain, I think, at times.
Yeah, and everyone can fall prey to it. I think there is a lot of quiet before the storm. I think in terms of like just even us Bitcoiners, and whether you are writing about Bitcoin or not, you've been open and out there about Bitcoin. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of content creators also have to be prepared for the bull market and the halving and all of these things that will come next year. And your content, podcasts in general, might see a lot more people coming into it. It's silly. I roll every time because it's just a price movement, right? It's
Oh
a
my
price movement.
gosh.
Whereas the tech, it's been here. The tech has been here. We've been here. We're here. Where are you
Yeah.
now? You know what I mean? For whether it's content creators or whether it's places and nonprofits throughout the global south trying to raise money, or clients trying to raise money, or these tech trying to raise money. Like next year, it's going to be through the roof, and then it'll die down again. And it's just kind of these cyclical motions of business that affect content creators, affect nonprofits, affect for-profit businesses. It affects everyone almost unanimously. And I think for yourself too, it's quiet right now. But I, at the time of recording too, I'll just shout this out. You on Nostr got a little jack bump as well.
Uh,
Recently. I can't remember when it was,
yeah.
but so you're putting out stuff that people are seeing because it's
Yeah.
different in terms of the space that you're in. It's needed, and it shouldn't be different. And I say that because like this is some of the main stuff we should be talking about, is the things that you're focusing on, these humanitarian issues, these global stories, about financial inclusion, about dictatorships. Like this should be the norm. But you're putting out great work. So I think people are seeing it, and I think it will pay off in the end with a lot of what you're doing. And hopefully you'll start to see that soon.
Yeah, and not just like the words, but also just to see developers and builders, everybody be like, oh, right, okay, we have this particular case, right? Like one of the stories I featured in the newsletter was this gentleman called Gary, and he is blind. So how do we
Yep.
make wallets be accessible to blind people, right? Like if we're always talking
Yeah.
about Bitcoin as like, I don't know, an investment in inflation hedge, all of that, like the economics part of it, then we forget people that are different to us, that have different physical or intellectual disabilities. That's really important,
Yeah.
right? So I almost see my work as like, okay, let me find people, and then let me give those stories to the people in this space that are building stuff, to say, hey, don't forget, we've got to include these people, we've got to build for them. So kind of see it like as a
Mhm.
bridge between those two worlds. Because I don't come from a technical background. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I found my niche. I found what I'm passionate about. I found also what my skill set is, which is I discovered I like to write. So, and then just going in that direction. Not everybody's going to be a builder, and not everybody's going to be a content
Yeah.
creator. So whatever that path is for you, go for it. It's not been done. And if it has been done, it's never been done by you. And we need it to be done by you. So I'm really, really
Yeah.
big on helping and encouraging people to get onto the space and contribute in whatever capacity that is. And you don't even know what that's going to bring, right? Like when I started the newsletter again, I didn't realize that that would mean one day I'm seeing the Oslo Freedom Forum, right? The Financial Freedom Track Day with
Mhm.
Ben. That was really cool and
Yeah.
such a sweet surprise from life itself, that it's just like, just do your thing, go down your own path, doors will open up, and you'll feel so rewarded when you start to see the impact that you have. And so it's a really exciting time to be in the Bitcoin space, I think.
Yeah, and those are some of the most rewarding things. Like I'm sure you've got messages just of people being supportive and same on my end. I mean, some of the most important messages to me are when I receive messages from folks that maybe I don't identify with the norm cultural community that people think of with Bitcoin, whether it's someone from the left, someone from the trans community, reaching out and just saying like, thanks. I'm kind of
Um,
here in the backgrounds, like listening, and I appreciate it. I feel heard, I feel seen, and I'm able to access Bitcoin content in a new way now, even though they already were, but they were trying to, hold their breath or like keep their opinions to themselves because they were scared to be who they are in this community or whatever the case may be. So more people they can identify with coming into the community and saying, okay, now I'm going to be a bit more vocal. And people being more vocal in the community, whether it's writing, whether it's going out to meetups, you get to meet other people. Maybe your voice gets more well known, and then you do that same thing for someone else. And it's a ripple effect and a greater impact. So again, someone can get into Bitcoin if you just want to hold it and have it as a better savings account for your family. That's great. That's
yeah.
fine. Like do what is best for you. But I think there are a lot of people that it's like we need you and want you. Like
Yes.
your brilliance and expertise, whatever. There is no certain type of person that should or shouldn't be engaging with Bitcoin. Like it's you, whoever you is.
Yes.
We want to help make the world a better place. Like come and join us. That's
Yes.
what I hope the message can be.
And this is why I thought also the whole conversation around building a citadel was
Mm,
to me quite sad to see, because I
mhm.
thought, and I didn't give it a lot of attention because I was like, this isn't something I buy into. And I know the intentions were great. Bitcoiners, for the most part, have these giant hearts. They're very
Yeah.
kind and stuff. But then when I would hear these narratives around building a citadel and we'll have the Bitcoiners there, and I'm like, oh, hold on, an exclusive community where only those that were lucky enough to understand how Bitcoin works and can use it live. It sounds not very different to an exclusive community in the fiat system where people that understand how it works can then
Mm,
use it to their advantage. To me, it was like it's kind of the same thing, except that
yeah.
one's framed as good or bad. And I thought that that was so dangerous and exclusive, and not, it's for some people it's not their fault they're not into Bitcoin. Some of them couldn't read. Like my grandma couldn't learn to read. So, she's
Yeah.
indigenous, my family indigenous descent. They didn't get to go to school, read, etc. They don't have a lot of the critical thinking skills that you're taught in, university or school, whatever. Or people have really tricky relationships with money, with freedom,
Mhm.
especially if they've been oppressed for a while, right? Like things take time, right? And so just because they didn't get it, this whole I don't have time to teach you, or you don't get to be a part of this citadel, is very, very dangerous. It's very sad. I was sad to see that happen. Um, it's you're pushing people out, even though you mean so well. So we have to kind
Yeah.
of stop saying who gets to be in the citadel. We stop saying who gets to be a real Bitcoiner or not. Let people live. If the whole meat eating thing. I'm vegetarian slash vegan, but have now started eating meat. Not because Bitcoiners pushed me. I mean, maybe a little bit, but because I had problems with iron. Okay, so I was like, okay, I'll eat meat, but I listen to my body and I make my own decisions. But please don't tell me what a true Bitcoiner is. Right? Bitcoin is for everybody. It's inclusive by
Mhm.
design at its protocol layer. Like it absolutely does not care if you're a human or a car. right? Like, so
Yeah.
why should the people care who is in Bitcoin and who's not, who's a real Bitcoiner, who's a not? And so if we're on Bitcoin, it is my opinion that we don't get a say into who's in or who's out. Like what your opinion is about trans, gay, animal, I just don't care. It just almost like there
Yeah.
shouldn't be a space for those conversations. The space that we should be having is, you have a question about it? Well, let me help you. How do I help you? What
Yeah.
question do you have? And that's it. Right. Like, because if we continue down this path, it's my fear that then it's just the human intervention messing with Bitcoin. And we're not going to see the adoption that we're all hoping to see. And we suffer for it too. Our lives are made uh, more dull and boring by not having people of diverse
Hmm.
backgrounds and beliefs, right? Like we win. It's a win-win. So I'm very, very passionate about Bitcoin being out to the masses, and I don't care who you are. The more the merrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I think in order for us to get there, and I don't mince words when I say this, I mean, one of the things I got passionate about early on is, and there are many folks that share this belief too, but when I was learning about Bitcoin, I had to weed through a lot of content that I have very different values from that person who might be writing that content, but also certain chapters in a book or certain things that didn't have something to do with Bitcoin they were talking about in a Bitcoin book or in a Bitcoin podcast, right? And everyone is fully able to have their own views and beliefs and things like that. But I think I started to realize like mass adoption is really going to be hurt here if we tie Bitcoin to a political identity. So I
yes.
do get very frustrated when people would suggest that I or others are making Bitcoin political. And I'm like, listen, we're coming in because Bitcoin for a while. And this is no secret. Like, I think people are kidding themselves. Like, Bitcoin at large, the Bitcoin community, when people are just kind of fumbling through Twitter or online or whatever, you might see that it's more like in the US specifically, but it kind of the US has overarching reach throughout the world as well. But in the US, you see that it's like dominated by white men conversations or
Yeah.
dominated by a Judeo Christian background or dominated by meat eating culture or whatever. Those things are fine for people who want to do that. I'm not saying there shouldn't be there. I would be just as critical if people were saying that Bitcoin is only a left wing movement or
Yeah.
only Democrats are in Bitcoin or whatever the case may be in the US context, right? I'm passionate about making sure people realize it's not that. Because before I got into Bitcoin, a lot of my friends and myself viewed Bitcoin as that. And once I learned about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like one of the most incredible things. And oh my gosh, people are thinking it's blank. And many people on their left are to blame for this, that criticize Bitcoin and just attach things to it that are not the case, not in good faith. But a lot of folks in the Bitcoin community are not helping themselves and not helping the movement by doing this. And I do know quite a number of right wing Bitcoin maxis that are very much understanding of this. And they're saying, these might be my views, but like Bitcoin's for everyone.
Yeah.
Here's why. Let's get out a more diverse message about Bitcoin. And that's fantastic. But people saying or people pretending that's not the case still, and that, oh, it's for everyone, just grab a seat. And it's like, yes, but first we need to try to talk about some of these things and be open and honest about what it is and isn't, and being honest about like Bitcoin is for everyone, and stop posting and trashing on certain types of people or certain types of diets or whatever the case may be when you're also talking about Bitcoin in the same sentence, right?
Yeah.
Like you can have different views and beliefs and that's fine, but there's so much of that some people are just not able to push through to get to Bitcoin. And I think they should, but sometimes it's hard.
But just instead of criticizing, like just give constructive feedback or help encourage and build, like just keep that negative energy and the pointing finger to yourself. Like just let people build, write, contribute in one way, and let's just encourage each other, not fight all the time. And I think you're right that
Yeah.
sometimes it becomes too political. And I think even with the messaging, something that makes me just stop a little bit sometimes is when I see the messaging around like Bitcoin is the US dream or something like that. Um,
Oh,
is
the
the
American
American
dream.
dream or something like that. Yeah, the American dream. And to me, it's like,
Mhm.
what is the American, like, to me, it's no, it's the human dream. The idea that we have this American dream is because so many people were in such dark circumstances back home. Like nobody would really like to leave their family, their country, their culture behind. A lot of them were forced to. And so it's not the American dream. I think it's the human dream. It's everybody from every corner of the world. It's their hope to have freedom. So that's another way that I also
Mm.
see politicized is like, as somebody that's not American, I hear that and I'm like, okay, now I'm out, because that's not my dream, right? Like to go to the US is not my dream.
Yeah.
I don't identify, but I do want freedom. I want to rebuild my country. If I can contribute to rebuilding Venezuela, I would love to. So it's for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody should be in the space. And so, yeah, I think we need a sort of a coming back together and saying what our values are as a community, and contributing to that in our different skill sets in our different ways.
Yeah, and pushback, encouragement, just all of the conversation is welcome and needed, right? It's not like these echo chamber conversations amongst Bitcoiners. Like, there needs to be pushback. There needs to be respectful dialogue. That's important for any community. And Bitcoin is a community. It is, in terms of like a movement that people believe in. It's still relatively small. It's bigger than it was in 2013, but it's still relatively small. So it takes a lot of different voices to get to that mainstream adoption.
Yeah,
I
and
think
there's
you're
been
exactly
so
right.
much progress made in the last 14 years, like you say. So a lot of innovation too that
Yeah.
doesn't get covered in mainstream media. It's so exciting to see the work that's happening in the Lightning space and Bitcoin Nostr, like all the stories of people being helped by Bitcoin. That's so encouraging. It's really, really amazing. I said that we don't see it on like CNN or Fox, but if you kind of have doubts about Bitcoin, just know that there is so much brain power and energy and funding, like even from the Human Rights Foundation, going into the space. Like all of that work is happening behind the scenes. People are just at home working away, trying to build a better world. That is super cool. And it's going to be really interesting to see where we are in 6 months from now, in 2 years from now, all the innovation that has come out from people building in the summer and in bear markets. So I suspect that even the silence is telling. It's going to be much bigger. It's almost like Bitcoin, the space just goes through like these exponential growths. So just because you're not hearing it in mainstream media doesn't mean it's dead. No, it's, if anything, I think people are secretly working at things, and it's going to be really cool to be telling those stories in the next few months and years.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I know we'll both be telling those stories, and I'm excited to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ayelen, before we jump off, I want to make sure that people know where they can find you. What are some things you got coming up that you're excited about? Anything you want to let people know about?
Yeah, so I'm still going to continue working on the newsletter, rebranding that very soon to Notes from the Margin, the podcast as well. Just continuing to do storytelling, to do real interviews of people around the world that are exploring Bitcoin and just fighting for their financial freedom. Just continuing down that path, focusing my time on it, my energy, because again, we all have a finite amount of energy, and this is where I want to spend it. So that's what I have so far.
Yeah.
I'll be going to Nashville for the Global Bitcoin Summit in September, and then crossing my fingers that I make it to Africa and Bali for the Bitcoin conferences. So if I do and you see me, please say hi. Are you going to those conferences, by the way?
Will do. I don't know at the moment. My schedule is all over the place. Job stuff's all over the place. This is all over the place. So we'll see. I definitely hope to, though.
Okay. Well, I hope I get to meet you in person one day. That would be really cool. That would be really nice.
Yeah, we definitely will. We'll definitely make it happen. Yeah, we will. And we'll have more conversations like this. I know on and offline. I know offline we have, and we'll do more of these online conversations too, because I think this was really awesome, and I really enjoyed this chat with you. So thank you for this.
Oh, thanks for having me, Trey.